Hi and welcome to a very cool iOS and Swift tutorial. Today we're going to create a Twitter-like app and we're going to use Parse as a back-end service to realize this app idea. So I want to give you a quick demo of what we're going to create. So this is our app screen, and you're going to be prompted for user credentials at the first start. So you have to enter a username, let's say test user. There are already two, so let me give this the number 3 and a simple password 123, and we can now sign up for our service. And this is our very empty timeline right now, and we're calling this app Swiffer. So let's create a new suite and just type something, hi, this is my first suite, and say done, and then it appears in the timeline. We've got the username here, we've got the suite here, and a little timestamp at the top. And if we just type something else, let's just type something, and click done, we're getting our timeline updated. And just like in Twitter, these new suites are positioned at the top. So this data is completely stored on a web server, and backend code is always a bit difficult and not so nice if you're familiar with Objective-C or now Swift. And you, as an iOS developer, you don't need to know everything about backend service programming. There are quite interesting services out there, just like Parse, or in the future maybe CloudKit is going to be a similarly reliable option. But for now, let's use Parse, and I want to show you how this actually works. So Parse lets you do different things, from storing data in the cloud, sending push notifications, remote push notifications, and a whole lot more things. And they have a great pricing model, so it's completely free. You not even have to enter credit card informations, as long as you limit yourself to 30 requests per second, which is a lot, and you have incredible file storage and database storage. But see this for yourself, and you have to decide whether you want to use Parse or other services. They also have a great documentation, which we're going to use later. But let me show you now in the dashboard what Swiffer what data Swiffer stores actually. So we have two tables, if you want to speak in database language, which is a user table and a suites table, which holds our content of the suite, a created add date, an updated date, and the person or the user that published this content. We will call it Sweeter. So this is actually what we see in the back end of our app, and we do not have to create any of these tables. We do not have to create any classes here in the back end. We can all do it within Xcode and using Swift. So let's take a quick look at the documentation, which is really cool. You can use Parse in a whole lot of different on a whole lot of different platforms, and we will use iOS or OS X. And if we just click on something like objects and we take a look at the sample code or documentation code here, you see that you have two options already, Objective-C and Swift. So this is really cool if you want to start developing your iOS 8 apps right now. We will start this tutorial with setting up our Parse app. So let me go to the dashboard and just hit create new app, and we will call this let's say Swiffer app, and say create app. After the app is created, we can use use some templates, or we can just use the quick help that is offered by Parse. So we get different things here, but let's say we want to do the Quickstart guide, which is great, and we can say we want to do a data-driven application. We want to do it for a mobile platform. We want to use iOS, and we will select Objective-C. Swift is not an option right here, and we will select existing projects so that you can see how this actually works. So the first step you have to do is downloading the SDK, so I'm going to do that right now, and then we have to add some dependencies later. But let's just finish with this now and create our new Xcode project. So there's my project. We will, as always, use an empty application. And I will call this Swiffer app. And we won't use core data as language, we are going to use Swift. So hit next and create on desktop. So now we've got our app ready. And first we have to add some of the dependencies to our app, which are listed here. So I'm going to add them. Clicking on my project, scrolling down a bit, and now click on the linked frameworks and libraries. And now I'm just going to add all the libraries, starting with Audio Toolbox, adding this one, and adding all the rest of the libraries. And I'm going to stop the video now and record and start recording again when I'm done with this. Well, now we have added a whole bunch of different libraries, which are all necessary for using Parse within your application. And the last step we are going to do is actually adding Parse as a framework, which is in my downloads folder right now. I'm going to add Parse to my project, copy items if needed, and add to target Swiffer app, and click finish, and then we have added the Parse framework to our app. And to tidy this up a little, let's just say that we're select all of these frameworks, right click and select new group from selection, and these are our frameworks. And now we can just collapse that, and our outliner is free. So far, so good. Now, we're going to have to, when we take a look at the Parse Quickstart guide, we have to connect our app to Parse. Therefore, we're getting an application ID and a client key, and we have to import an Objective-C header file. And we want to code our app using Swift. So how are we going to use a Objective-C header file within Swift? This is something you might come across someday, so let's go ahead and do the necessary steps. So first we're going to select, create a new file, and this is going to be an Objective-C file. And this can be named anything, like file or whatever you want, and say create. Xcode is going to ask us now, would you like to configure an Objective-C bridging header? We say yes. And then we get a Swiffer app bridging header. We can now remove the .m file that we have created just a second ago. Hit delete, move to trash, and I'm going to move this up a little here. And now we have this Swiffer app bridging header. And what we're going to do now is say import parse /parse.h. And now we can use the Parse framework within our app coding with Swift. So to illustrate that, let's go ahead and go to appdelegate.swift. Because this is an empty project, we got a default window here. So let's get rid of that because we're going to use a storyboard to create our user interface later. So now let's copy the sample code from Parse to our project. This is this code. This is Objective-C code. And we're going to rewrite it in Swift. So let me do some comments here. Paste it right there. And now we want to create a test object. But before we can do that, we have to register for our app with Parse. So let me also copy this application ID and client key and paste it here. So now we can just say parse dot set application ID, and now we can do two strings here. Now we have the application ID here, we'll paste it there, and the client key here, and paste it there. All right, so this is done. So now let's see if this actually works, and now you can see how easy parse actually is. We're going to create a PF object as it suggests in this comment below. So let's say var test object, which is of class PF object, and we'll say PF object open parentheses, and we'll just say class name, which is now test object, and now we can add something to our test object, either using this syntax, using the brackets, foo and bar, or we can also say test object dot object for key. Just going to build that. Oh, yeah, you shouldn't use the @ sign here. So test object dot object for set object for key. We can say user 1 for key user, for just an example. So these both this is both possible. So let's save this object in the background. Set test object dot save in background. So we can get rid of this comment now. And now let's build and run the application. So we ran the application, we get an empty window because there is no window, there is no storyboard right now. So let's go to Safari again and say test. And it says, congrats, you saved your first object, having foo bar and user 1. And this is cool because we can now check out the data browser. And we can see now test object, and our test object indeed has two new columns. With two custom columns. One is foo, the other is user. And we have one entry. We have the entry, the value bar for foo, and we have the value user1 in the column user. So all of that we have done within our code. We did not have to create a table within this backend application. So that's it actually. Let's delete this test object code here and create our user interface. So we're going to create a new storyboard, hitting Command N on my keyboard, selecting user interface, storyboard. It's going to be a device, iPhone application. So let me select iPhone, and here we're going to check that our targets are selected, which is just the Swiffer app, and say create. And we've got our empty storyboard. So now let's add the storyboard to our project, saying that the main interface is a storyboard, restrict that to portrait, and go back to storyboard. So now first we're going to create a table view controller because this is the basis of our application. And then we will, because there's going to be a detail view in which we will create our suites. So let me just show you that. we have this button, which will bring us to a detail view controller, and we can all do this this transition between detail view controller and our timeline without writing any line of code. So how are we going to do that? We will select this table view and click on Editor and say Embed in Navigation Controller. So now we've got a navigation controller and we have our table view. Cool. Now, how does that look? One cell in this table view contains a label, another label, and a text view, which is not editable but selectable. In this cell, we are going to paste our content of from the parse backend later. So let's go ahead and create this this table view cell, which is going to be a custom table view cell. So we click on the table view here in the outliner view, and for the at first we are going to make this a little bigger, like this. And now we will bring some new UI elements to it. We said there is going to be a label, there is going to be another label, and there is going to be a text view. So let's choose this text view here. All right. And now we will position this label here, position another label there, bring this text view to here. Yeah, let's bring it a little bit to the top. Also the text view. All right, that should do it. Now let's remove all this demo content here. Let's give this text view a little light background color. And actually that's it for our custom table view cell. So now we are going to need an add button, which will bring us to the detail view controller. So let's type in UI bar button item, which we will then drag to the upper right corner here. And we will then click on it and say that this is going to be an add button. So this brings directly, so you click on this, click on the button and say as identify add. You could also choose edit or redo or bookmarks or whatever, and you get by default some iOS 7 icons that will illustrate what this button is going to do. You can also choose custom buttons, but for the simplicity of this tutorial, we're going to use standard components. So let's then add another view controller to our storyboard. Let me collapse that to give us some more room here. All right. And now to create this transition from this table view controller to this view controller, we will just click again on this add button, press Control on the keyboard and drag to this view controller and select push to create a segue between those two view controllers. And this is cool because this saves us all the code that we would have to write to transition between those two view controllers. All right. Now we need some other UI elements here. So let's click on it. We need another text view here and a character count here, which is going to be a label, and it illustrates how many characters are remaining for our suite. So let's add another text view to here. Make this a little smaller. Place it. Oh, let's do that again. Let's also deactivate auto layout for this tutorial. So click on this show the file inspector icon and deactivate auto layout. Auto layout is a cool feature, but again, for the simplicity of this tutorial, we're not going to use auto layout. So let's bring this text view to here, move it up a little. I actually don't understand why we have this space at the top here, but we'll see if this is going to be a problem. So there is our text view. I'm going to give this a little background color so that we can distinguish it from the rest of the view here. So let's put it in the middle here, and let's also add a label to the lower right corner here, and let's also do align this right so that the characters are shifted right. Well, that should actually do it. So now let's let me enter some text here again. It is shifted downwards. I don't understand why, but anyway, let's run the application and see if this works. It works great. Actually, you can see that we did not have to write any line of code. We have our table view. We do not have the elements yet here, but I'm going to show you how to get them in a minute. We have the custom transition. We have another text here and a label here. Let's see later if we get this to work properly. So let's do some further adjustments. We will have to select this text view here and say that it's not editable so that you can write in it actually. That's not needed because it's only there to display the content. Here editable is alright because we have to edit the text here. We are entering our suite here. What we're going to need now is another bar button item which we will place here, and this will be a done button, and it will say done, so that we can say when we are finished composing our suite. And now we actually have to connect all these user interface elements with some code, and therefore we're going to create classes. So let's select the app delegate.swift, press Command N on the keyboard, and create some new Cocoa Touch classes. The first one is going to be our timeline table view controller. So let me call that timeline, and select it as a subclass of UI table view controller. Timeline table view controller. Say next, and create. And we will now connect this table view controller, which is this button here, to our class that we just created, if it lets me. Table view controller. It was hidden. So you have to select the identity inspector and select a custom class, and this is in our case timeline table view controller. And now let's do the same thing for this detail view controller, which I'm going to name compose view controller, and you can just say UI view controller here, and it will autocomplete it right there. So compose view controller, say next and create. And let's also add this in our as our custom class in the identity inspector. So let's say compose view controller. Now we have connected those two elements on the storyboard with the code with the code files we just created. Now we have to connect the user interface elements. So let's start with the compose view controller. I'm going to click on it on this text view for a start, and then opening the assistant editor. The assistant editor is cool because you can now just press the control key on your keyboard and click on the text view and drag it to the code. It automatically, because we are set to automatic, it automatically chooses the right class, which is compose view controller, and lets us now create a so-called outlet, and we're going to call it sweet text view, and say connect, and there's our text view. And we're going to do the same with the label. So let's say character remaining label and connect. And then there is our done button, which will save our suite to the database. So we're going to click on this done button as well, drag it down here because here are our functions, and we will now select action instead of outlet, and we will then say send suite as a function name and say connect. It automatically creates the proper function for us. Now we will close the assistant editor and go back to the compose view controller because we see an error here. And what we have to do now is initialize those two properties, those two connections from the storyboard by calling the constructor of the text view and the label. So let's do that. Writing UI text view, opening and closing parentheses, and the same doing with UI label. This just calls the constructor of the of these two classes and initializes our two objects. So now, as there is going to be an error later when we run the application, I'm going to write now init with coder. I still don't know if this is going to be needed in the future, because when writing Objective-C code, you didn't have to implement this this function or this constructor, but we will have to do that here, init with coder, because else we're going to get an error. So let's write this init function, calling this super function init, and give this a decoder. And let's just copy this and paste it to our timeline table view controller class. So now let's run the application, see if this still works. Still works. We can click on our plus button. We get our new done button here, and now it's time for our custom cell. So we will create another Swift class for that. So again, press Command N on your keyboard, select the Cocoa Touch class, and we will now say Suite, and select UI table view cell. So this is going to be a Suite table view cell. Say next and create. And as we did with the two view controllers, we're going to do the same thing, selecting the table view cell and giving it our custom class name, which is Suite table view cell. We also have to give this cell a so-called reuse identifier, which will just be cell. This is necessary because the table view cells are not loaded one after another. They are actually just a bunch of cells in memory, and they're going to be reused when you scroll through them. So therefore we have to use a cell identifier, and if we now just run the app again and see if this works, and it works just great. So let's close the app again. And I think that's it regarding the user interface. I will just see if I can get this right. So let me delete this text view again. I'll just paste another one here. Delete that. I will then leave this size and hope for the best. And if you did something like that yourself, and you want to connect it again with the code, just open the interface, the assistant editor, and you will notice that there is actually an unfilled circle here. And now you can just click on that plus and connect it from this side to the storyboard, or you can again press Control and click drag and release the mouse over this outlet, and that's it, and they are connected again. So let me check if now the text is at the right position, and it is. So let's stop the tutorial for now, and in the next lesson we're going to create all the other code that is necessary for this app to work.